During Sunday dinner, my son-in-law threw my plate on the floor and shouted, "If you want dinner, lick it off the floor." I stood up, adjusted my coat, and said, "Now it's my turn." I left for 15 minutes and came back with 2 policemen. When they read the eviction order, he trembled in front of everyone. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Patrick. I'm 61 years old, and I never imagined that a Sunday dinner could destroy what little remained of my dignity." 3 years had passed since Margaret died. 3 years since I lost the woman who made this house a home. The silence that followed her absence was suffocating, a weight that pressed against my chest every morning when I opened my eyes and remembered she wasn't there beside me. Claire, my daughter, seemed to understand that pain. 2 weeks after the funeral, she showed up at my door with Leonard, her husband, and 2 suitcases. "Dad, we can't leave you alone like this," she said, her eyes filled with concern that felt genuine at the time. "Leonard and I talked, and we want to stay with you for a while, just until you feel better." I didn't want to be alone. The house felt too big, too empty without Margaret. So I said yes. That was my first mistake. At first, everything seemed normal. Claire cooked on Sundays. Leonard helped with small repairs around the house. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. Leonard's tone when speaking to me became sharper. Claire stopped asking how I was feeling and started asking what I needed from the store, as if I were just another item on her shopping list. Small humiliations became routine. Leonard would leave his dirty dishes on the table, expecting me to clean them. He'd change the TV channel without asking, even when I was watching something. When I tried to say something, Claire would intervene. "Dad, don't be difficult. Leonard had a stressful day at work." I swallowed it. I swallowed everything because I didn't want conflict. I didn't want to lose my daughter. But that Sunday, something inside me broke. I had spent the afternoon preparing dinner. Roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, green beans. It was Margaret's recipe, the one she made every Sunday when Claire was little. I thought that maybe, just maybe, that meal would bring back some warmth, some memory of when we were a real family. I set the table carefully. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses. I called them to dinner. Leonard came first, phone in hand, not even looking at me. Claire followed, her face tired, distant. They sat down without a word. I served Leonard's plate first, then Claire's, then mine. I sat down, trying to smile. "It's your mom's recipe," I said to Claire, my voice almost a whisper. "I thought you'd like it." She looked at the plate and nodded, but said nothing. Leonard picked up his fork, took a bite, and made a face. He dropped the fork on the plate with a loud clatter. "This is cold," he said, his voice filled with disdain. I felt my face flush. I just took it out of the oven, Leonard. It can't be cold." He looked at me, his eyes hard, and then did something I'll never forget. He picked up my plate, the one I had carefully prepared, and threw it on the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the house. "If you want dinner, lick it off the floor," he shouted, his face twisted with rage. The room fell silent. I stared at the broken plate, at the food scattered across the floor, at the pieces of porcelain that seemed to reflect the pieces of my dignity. I looked at Claire, hoping, praying she would say something, that she would defend me, that she would stand up and tell her husband he'd gone too far. But she didn't. She just looked away, her hands trembling slightly on the table, and in that silence, in that complicity, I understood everything. This wasn't the first time I had accepted humiliation. It wasn't the first time I had swallowed my pain to keep the peace. I had been doing it for 3 years, every day, every moment, until I became invisible in my own home. But something in Leonard's eyes, something in the way he looked at me with pure contempt, made me realize I had reached my limit. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking, but I didn't let them see it. I adjusted my coat, the one Margaret had given me on our last anniversary, and looked directly at Leonard. "Now it's my turn," I said, my voice calm, controlled. Leonard laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh. "Your turn? What are you going to do, old man?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the door. "Dad, where are you going?" Claire's voice came from behind me, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my car keys from the hook and walked out. The cold night air hit my face, but I barely felt it. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked the car and got in. For 3 years, I had let them treat me like I was nothing, like I was a burden they had to bear. But they forgot something important. This house, this property that Leonard looked at with greedy eyes, thinking it would one day be his, was never theirs to take. It was mine. It had always been mine, and I was about to remind them of that. I drove through the empty streets, my mind racing with memories I had tried to bury. It started 6 months after Margaret's funeral. I was still lost in grief, barely functioning, when Leonard began making comments. Small things at first. "Patrick, this house is too big for you," he'd say, looking around with appraising eyes. "Have you thought about what will happen to it when you're gone?" I didn't answer. I couldn't think about the future when I was barely surviving the present. But Leonard didn't stop. The comments became more frequent, more direct. "Claire and I have been talking. We think it makes sense for you to transfer the deed to us now. You know, to avoid complications later, estate taxes and all that." I remember Margaret's voice in my head, something she told me years ago. "Leonard looks at everything like it's a transaction. Be careful, Patrick. He doesn't see family. He sees opportunities." I ignored her warning then. I thought she was being unfair. But she was right. She was always right. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I was sitting in the living room reading when I overheard Leonard on the phone in the kitchen. He thought I was asleep. "Yeah, the old man is losing it," he said, his voice casual, almost amused. "Won't be long now. Once we get the house in our name, we can sell it and finally get out of this dump. The property alone is worth at least $400,000. My blood ran cold. I sat frozen, the book trembling in my hands. "Claire's working on him," Leonard continued. "She knows how to play the guilt card. He'll sign eventually. He's too weak to say no to her." I felt sick. Not just because of what Leonard said, but because Claire was part of it. My daughter, the girl I raised, was conspiring to take everything from me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret, about the life we built together in that house. We bought it 42 years ago when Claire was just a baby. It was a small 2-bedroom house back then. Nothing special, but we made it ours. We painted the walls, planted the garden, fixed the leaky roof ourselves because we couldn't afford a contractor. Over the years, the neighborhood changed. It became desirable. Property values skyrocketed, but we never thought about selling. This was our home. This was where we raised Claire, where we celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where we held each other through the hard times. And now Leonard wanted to take it, sell it, erase everything Margaret and I built. The next morning, I made a decision. I went to see Robert, my lawyer. He'd been a friend of Margaret's family for decades, someone I trusted. "Robert, I need to ask you something," I said, sitting across from him in his office. "The house, the one Margaret and I bought together, is the deed still in my name?" Robert looked through his files and nodded. "Yes, Patrick. After Margaret passed, the house automatically transferred to you as the surviving spouse. It's entirely in your name." Relief washed over me, followed immediately by determination. "I never signed anything transferring it to Claire and Leonard?" "No," Robert said, frowning. "Why would you?" I told him everything. The comments, the overheard conversation, the way they treated me in my own home. Robert's face darkened as he listened. "Patrick, I'm going to be honest with you," he said when I finished. "What they're doing, this psychological pressure, it's a form of elder abuse. You have rights, and if they're living in your house without your continued consent, you have the legal right to remove them." "Can I do that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I actually make them leave?" "Yes," Robert said firmly. "You're the sole owner. If you want them out, I can draft a formal eviction notice. Given the circumstances, I can also get a court order expedited." I sat there, my hands clasped together, thinking. Part of me wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that Claire didn't really want to take the house from me. But I knew better. I had heard Leonard's words. I had seen Claire's silence every time he humiliated me. "Do it," I said finally. "Prepare the papers." Robert nodded. "Patrick, are you sure? This will damage your relationship with your daughter." I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I felt clear. "Robert, the relationship is already damaged. I'm just protecting what's left of me." Over the next 2 weeks, Robert worked on the documents. During that time, I watched Leonard and Claire carefully. I saw the way Leonard controlled every conversation, the way Claire deferred to him even when I tried to talk to her alone. I saw how they looked at the house, at the furniture Margaret and I collected over the years, like they were already calculating what each piece was worth. I documented everything. The way Leonard spoke to me, the chores they expected me to do, the times Claire turned away when Leonard was cruel. I kept a journal, writing down dates and details. Robert said it might be useful if they tried to fight the eviction. One evening, about a week before that final Sunday dinner, Claire came to me. She sat down next to me on the couch, her face soft, concerned. "Dad, Leonard and I have been thinking," she said gently. "We love living here with you, but we feel like we're imposing, so we had an idea. What if you transferred the house to us, and you could stay here as long as you want? That way, everything's settled, and you don't have to worry about paperwork and taxes and all that complicated stuff." She smiled at me, the same smile she'd given me as a child when she wanted something, but her eyes were different now, calculating. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice neutral. Her smile faltered slightly. "Dad, we really think it's best. Leonard talked to a financial advisor, and this is the smartest way to handle things." I looked at my daughter, this woman I no longer recognized, and felt an ache so deep it nearly broke me. I said, "I'll think about it, Claire." She stood up, frustrated. "You're being stubborn. Mom would want you to be practical about this." That was when I knew there was no going back. She was using Margaret against me, weaponizing my grief. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't use your mother like that." Claire's face hardened. She walked away without another word. Now, driving through the dark streets toward Robert's office, I felt that same hardness settle in my chest. The papers were ready. The eviction notice was prepared. All I needed to do was pick them up. I had 15 minutes. 15 minutes to collect the documents, stop by the police station to request an escort for the eviction, and return home. 15 minutes to take back my life. As I pulled into Robert's parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Dad, where are you? You left without eating." I didn't respond. I walked into Robert's office, signed the final papers, and tucked the envelope under my arm. When I got back in my car, I sat there for a moment, staring at the envelope. Inside was the legal proof that the house was mine, that I had every right to remove them, that I was not the powerless old man they thought I was. I thought about Margaret, about what she would say if she could see me now. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that she would tell me to fight. I started the car and drove toward the police station. The police station was quiet when I walked in. A young officer sat at the front desk, typing on a computer. He looked up as I approached. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. I placed the envelope on the counter, my hand steadier than I expected. "I need an escort for a legal eviction. I have all the paperwork here." He opened the envelope, scanning the documents. His eyebrows rose slightly as he read. "This is your property?" "Yes," I said. "My house. The people living there, my daughter and her husband, they've been treating me poorly. My lawyer says I have the right to remove them." The officer looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or sympathy. "How long have they been living with you?" 3 years, I said, "since my wife died." He nodded slowly. "Give me a few minutes. I'll get someone to accompany you." I sat in the waiting area, my heart pounding against my ribs. Part of me still couldn't believe I was doing this. Part of me wanted to walk out, drive home, pretend none of this had happened. But then I remembered Leonard's face when he threw my plate on the floor. I remembered Claire's silence. 20 minutes later, 2 officers approached me. One was the young man from the desk. The other was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. "Mr. Holloway?" the older officer said. "I'm Officer Davis, and this is Officer Chen. We're going to escort you home and ensure the eviction notice is served properly." "Thank you," I managed to say. We drove separately, their patrol car following behind mine. The whole way back, my mind was racing. What would Leonard do? Would Claire cry? Would they refuse to leave? As I pulled into the driveway, I saw the lights were still on in the living room. Leonard's car was parked where it always was, taking up the spot Margaret used to use. I got out of my car. The officers stepped out of theirs, their presence suddenly making everything real. This was happening. There was no turning back now. I walked to the front door, my key in hand. But before I could unlock it, the door swung open. Leonard stood there, his face relaxed, almost amused. "Took you long enough, old man," he said. Then his eyes shifted to the officers behind me. His expression changed instantly. "What's going on?" I stepped inside, the officers following. Claire appeared from the kitchen, her face pale when she saw the uniforms. "Dad, what is this?" she asked, her voice rising. "Why are the police here?" Officer Davis stepped forward, his voice professional and calm. "We're here to serve a legal eviction notice. Mr. Patrick Holloway is the sole owner of this property, and he's exercising his right to remove you from the premises." Leonard's face went from confusion to shock to anger in the span of seconds. "Eviction? You can't evict us. We live here." "Not legally," Officer Davis said. He handed Leonard the documents. "You have 48 hours to vacate the property. This is a court order. If you fail to comply, you will be forcibly removed." I watched Leonard's hands tremble as he read the papers, his face drained of color. This man who had spent 3 years treating me like I was nothing, who had thrown my food on the floor just an hour ago, was now shaking. "This is insane," Leonard said, his voice cracking. "Claire, tell your father he can't do this." But Claire wasn't looking at Leonard. She was staring at me, her eyes wide, disbelieving. "Dad, what did you do?" I met her gaze, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't look away. "This is my house, Claire. It's always been my house. But we thought," she started, then stopped. Her face crumpled. "We thought you'd give it to us. You said you'd think about it." "I did think about it," I said quietly, "and I realized something. You never wanted me here. You wanted what I had." Leonard suddenly lunged forward, his face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful bastard. We took care of you. We gave up our lives to stay here with you." Officer Chen stepped between us immediately. "Sir, I need you to step back." "Gave up your lives?" I felt anger rising in my chest, anger I'd been suppressing for so long. "You moved in because your apartment lease ended and you had nowhere else to go. You stayed because you wanted this house." Leonard's mouth opened, then closed. He couldn't deny it. Claire sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. "Dad, please. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out." "You have 48 hours, Officer Davis said firmly. "That's more than enough time to make arrangements." "This is my home, too," Claire shouted suddenly, tears streaming down her face. "I grew up here. Mom would be ashamed of you." Those words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then I thought about Margaret, about what she really would have said. She would have seen through Leonard from the beginning. She would have protected me. "Your mother knew," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "She knew what kind of man Leonard was. She warned me about him, and if she were here now, she'd tell me I should have done this a long time ago." Claire's sobs grew louder, but I forced myself not to react. I couldn't let guilt control me anymore. Leonard tried a different approach. He straightened up, his voice becoming measured, almost reasonable. "Patrick, let's talk about this. We can work something out. I know I lost my temper earlier, but we're family. We can fix this." "Family," I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "Family doesn't humiliate each other. Family doesn't plot to steal from each other." Leonard's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I heard you," I said, 3 months ago, on the phone, talking about how Claire was working on me, how you were waiting for me to sign over the house, talking about selling it for $400,000. The room went silent. Claire's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at Leonard. You told me Dad wanted to give us the house. You said he was the one who suggested it." Leonard's face flushed. "Claire, I didn't mean it like that." "You lied to me," she whispered. "You lied about my own father." But I wasn't sure if she was truly surprised, or if she was just surprised that I knew. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Officer Davis cleared his throat. "Mr. Holloway, do you want to press charges for the earlier incident, throwing the plate?" I looked at Leonard, at the fear in his eyes, and shook my head. "No, I just want them gone." Leonard's shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him as he realized there was nothing he could do. The documents were legal. The house was mine. He had lost. "Where are we supposed to go?" Claire asked, her voice small, childlike. I felt a pang in my chest, but I pushed it down. "That's not my problem anymore, Claire. You made your choice when you let Leonard treat me the way he did, when you stayed silent, when you planned to take my home." "I didn't plan anything," she protested. "You didn't stop it either," I said, "and that's the same thing." Officer Davis handed me a copy of the eviction notice. "Mr. Holloway, I recommend you stay elsewhere for the next 48 hours, just to avoid any confrontations." "Do you have somewhere you can go?" I nodded. "I have a friend I can stay with." "Good. If they're not out by the deadline, call us, and we'll handle the removal." The officers prepared to leave. Leonard stood frozen in the middle of the living room, still holding the eviction papers. Claire sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands. As I followed the officers to the door, Claire called out one last time, "Dad, please." "I'm your daughter. You can't do this to me." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, I said, "You stopped being my daughter the moment you chose him over me." I walked out into the night air. Behind me, I could hear Claire's renewed sobs, Leonard's angry muttering, but I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove away from the house, away from the people who had made my life miserable for 3 years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. I felt free. I spent that night at Robert's house. He and his wife set up their guest room for me, asking no questions, just offering quiet support. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face when the officers handed Leonard those papers. By morning, my phone had 17 missed calls, 15 from Claire, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. There were text messages, too, dozens of them. "Dad, please answer. We need to talk. I can explain everything. Don't do this to us." I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Robert found me in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, staring at a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. "You okay?" he asked, sitting across from me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I keep wondering if I did the right thing." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Patrick, I've known you for 30 years. I watched you build a life with Margaret. I saw how you raised Claire, how much you love that girl, and I've seen these past 3 years how that love got twisted into something ugly. You did the right thing. Sometimes the right thing hurts like hell, but it's still right." I nodded, but his words didn't ease the weight in my chest. Around 10 in the morning, there was a knock at Robert's door. I was in the guest room when I heard voices, one of them familiar. Claire. I came out to find her standing in Robert's foyer. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair uncombed, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. "Dad," she said when she saw me. "Please, I need to talk to you." Robert looked at me, silently asking if I wanted him to make her leave. I shook my head. "It's fine. We can talk." Robert gestured to his living room. "I'll be in my office if you need me." Claire and I sat down, the coffee table between us like a barrier. She twisted her hands in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "I didn't know," she started. "About what Leonard said on the phone, about the plan to sell the house. I swear to you, Dad, I didn't know." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. "Then what did you know, Claire?" She swallowed hard. "Leonard told me, he said you were getting older, that you might not be able to take care of the house much longer. He said it would be easier if we took over the property. That way you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance and taxes and all that stuff. He made it sound like we were helping you." "And you believed him?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "I wanted to believe him. The house, Dad, it's worth so much money now. Leonard kept talking about how we could use it as collateral for a loan, how we could finally start the business he always wanted." I knew it wasn't right to think about it that way, but I pushed those thoughts down. I told myself we were helping you. I felt something break inside me. "So you did know, Claire. Maybe not all the details, but you knew Leonard wanted the house. You knew this wasn't really about helping me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry, Dad. I got greedy. I got selfish, and I let Leonard convince me that it was okay." "What about everything else?" I asked, my voice harder now. "What about the way he treated me, the way he spoke to me? You saw it all, Claire. You were there." She looked down at her hands. "I told myself it wasn't that bad, that Leonard was just stressed from work, that you were being too sensitive. I made excuses because it was easier than admitting my husband was cruel to my father." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why didn't you ever defend me?" Claire's face crumpled. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that if I stood up to Leonard, he'd leave. Afraid that I'd end up alone. Afraid that I'd become like you after Mom died." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I saw how broken you were, Dad, how lost, and I was terrified of feeling that way." Her words cut deep, but I forced myself to keep listening. "Leonard was my security," she continued. "He was strong when I felt weak. He made decisions when I couldn't. And somewhere along the way, I stopped questioning those decisions. I stopped questioning anything. I just went along with it because it was easier." I thought about the Claire I raised. The little girl who used to stand up to bullies at school, who argued with me about curfews and rules because she had her own mind. That girl had disappeared, replaced by this woman who let fear control her. "When did it start?" I asked. "When did Leonard start talking about the house?" Claire wiped her eyes. "About a year after we moved in. At first it was just comments, how the neighborhood had changed, how much the property values had gone up. Then he started showing me real estate websites, pointing out what houses like yours were selling for. He said we should start thinking about the future." "And you never thought to ask me what I wanted?" "I did," she said quickly. I asked you once if you'd ever thought about downsizing, moving to a smaller place. You said no, that you wanted to stay in the house you built with Mom. So Leonard changed tactics. He said we'd have to wait until you were gone, but then he got impatient. I felt sick. So the plan to transfer the deed, that was his idea? Yes. He said it was smart, that rich people do it all the time to avoid estate taxes. He made it sound so logical, so practical, and I went along with it. We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear the clock ticking on Robert's wall, marking the seconds of our broken relationship. What about last night? I asked. The dinner. Did you know he was going to do that? Claire shook her head violently. No, I swear I had no idea he'd go that far. When he threw your plate, I was shocked. But I didn't say anything because I've stopped saying anything. That's the problem, Claire, I said, feeling exhaustion wash over me. You stopped saying anything. You stopped being my daughter and became Leonard's wife, and those two things shouldn't be mutually exclusive. She sobbed openly now. I know I failed you. I chose him over you again, and I hate myself for it. But Dad, he's gone. I told him to leave this morning. I chose you. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at her, this woman who looked like my daughter but had become a stranger. You chose me after I forced your hand, after you lost the house you wanted. That's not really choosing me, Claire. That's just making the best of a bad situation. Her face went pale. That's not true. I love you, Dad. I don't doubt that you love me, I said. But love isn't enough. Not when you've spent 3 years showing me that I don't matter. Not when you let your husband humiliate me in my own home. Not when you conspired, even passively, to take everything Margaret and I built. Please, she begged, give me a chance to make it right. I'll do anything. I stood up, my body feeling older than my 61 years. The 48 hours stands, Claire. You need to be out of my house by tomorrow night. And then what? She asked desperately. Do I just disappear from your life? Do you just stop being my father? I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, Claire. Right now, I don't know anything except that I need space. I need time to figure out if we can salvage anything from this mess. How much time? I don't know, I repeated. Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe never. She stood up too, her legs shaky. I understand. I'll be out by tomorrow. Leonard and we're done. I'm going to stay with a friend until I figure things out. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Claire moved toward the door, then stopped. Dad, I know this doesn't change anything, but Mom was right about Leonard. She saw what he was before I did, and I should have listened to her. After she left, I stood in Robert's living room, feeling hollowed out. Robert emerged from his office. That couldn't have been easy, he said. It wasn't, I admitted, but it needed to happen. What now? I thought about that question. What now? My daughter was gone, or at least the version of her I once knew was gone. My house would be empty again. I'd be alone, just like after Margaret died. But this time it would be different. This time, it would be my choice. Now, I said, I wait for them to move out, and then I figure out how to live again. I returned to my house on the third day. Claire and Leonard were gone. The place was empty, silent in a way that felt both peaceful and unbearably lonely. They had taken their belongings, but nothing else. I half expected to find missing furniture or damaged walls, but everything was intact. It was as if they had simply vanished, leaving behind only the ghost of their presence. I walked through the rooms, slowly, taking in the emptiness. The guest bedroom where they had slept for 3 years was bare. The bathroom they used was clean. Even the kitchen, where so many tense meals had been shared, was spotless. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a funeral. I stood in the living room looking at the pictures on the mantel. Margaret and me on our wedding day. Claire as a baby, then as a little girl, then graduating high school. A family that no longer existed. I needed to do something, anything to distract myself from the silence. I decided to clean out the attic, a task I'd been putting off since Margaret died. She had kept everything up there. Boxes of memories we'd accumulated over 4 decades. The attic was dusty and hot. I pulled the cord for the light, and a weak yellow glow filled the space. Boxes were stacked everywhere, labeled in Margaret's neat handwriting. Christmas decorations, Claire's baby clothes, old tax documents, and then I saw a box I didn't recognize. It was smaller than the others, tucked away in a corner. The label simply said private. I pulled it down, my curiosity overriding any sense of invading Margaret's privacy. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in Margaret's handwriting. They were addressed to no one, dated over the course of several years. I picked up the first one, dated 5 years ago, just after Claire and Leonard got married. "I'm worried about Claire," Margaret had written. "Leonard seems charming on the surface, but there's something calculating about him. The way he looks at our house, at our things, it's like he's taking inventory. Patrick doesn't see it, or maybe he doesn't want to see it. But I do. I see the way Leonard asks questions about our finances, about the house, about our plans for retirement. He's not asking because he cares. He's asking because he's planning something." My hands trembled as I read. Margaret had known. She had seen through Leonard from the very beginning. I picked up another letter, this one dated 3 years ago, just weeks before she died. "I'm afraid of what will happen to Patrick after I'm gone," she wrote. "Leonard has been suggesting that he and Claire move in with us, supposedly to help. But I know better. Leonard wants this house. He's been waiting for an opportunity, and my illness is giving him one. I tried to talk to Patrick about it, but he thinks I'm being paranoid. He doesn't want to believe that Claire could be influenced by someone like Leonard, but I know our daughter. She's always been afraid of being alone, of being abandoned. Leonard knows that fear, and he uses it." I set the letter down, my vision blurring with tears. Margaret had tried to warn me. She had tried to protect me, even from beyond the grave. I continued reading. Letter after letter. Margaret documented everything. Leonard's manipulations, Claire's growing dependence on him, the subtle ways he began to take control of their lives. One letter, dated just days before Margaret's death, struck me the hardest. "I'm running out of time," Margaret wrote, her handwriting shaky, weaker than before. "The cancer is winning, and I won't be here to protect Patrick. I tried talking to Claire today, tried to tell her to be careful with Leonard, to not let him control her, but she got defensive. She said I was trying to ruin her marriage. She couldn't see what I saw, or maybe she didn't want to see it." Margaret's words continued. "I'm leaving these letters here hidden, because I hope Patrick never needs to read them. I hope I'm wrong about Leonard. I hope Claire finds her strength again. But if I'm right, if things go the way I fear they will, then maybe someday Patrick will find these words and understand. He'll understand that I saw it coming, that I tried to stop it, and that I never blamed him for not seeing it too." I couldn't read anymore. I sat on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by boxes of the past, and wept. Margaret had known everything. She had predicted everything. And she had carried that knowledge alone, trying to protect me even as she was dying. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? I thought back to those final weeks with Margaret, the conversations she tried to have about Claire and Leonard, the warnings I dismissed as the paranoia of a sick woman, the fear in her eyes when she talked about what would happen after she was gone. I had failed her. I had ignored her warnings, and I had paid the price. But more than that, Claire had failed her too. Margaret had tried to reach out to her, tried to make her see the truth about Leonard, and Claire had rejected her. She had chosen Leonard over her own dying mother's concerns. That realization hit me like a physical blow. Claire hadn't just betrayed me in the last 3 years. She had betrayed Margaret too. I gathered the letters carefully, placing them back in the box. These were Margaret's final gift to me. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that the pain I felt was real and justified. I carried the box downstairs and set it on the kitchen table. For a long time I just stared at it, thinking about what to do next. My phone rang. It was Claire. I'd been ignoring her calls for days, but something about reading Margaret's letters made me answer. "Dad." Claire's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for answering. I need to talk to you." "I'm listening," I said, my voice flat. "Can I come over? Please? There's something I need to tell you." Against my better judgment, I agreed. An hour later, Claire stood in my doorway. She looked thinner, older somehow. Life without Leonard and without the security of my house was clearly taking its toll. She came inside, her eyes immediately going to the box on the kitchen table. "What's that?" "Sit down, Claire," I said. "We need to talk." She sat, her hands folded in her lap like a child waiting for punishment. I pushed the box toward her. "I found these in the attic. They're letters your mother wrote, private letters. I want you to read them." Claire's face went pale. "Dad, I don't think—" "Read them," I said firmly. "You need to understand what your mother knew, what she tried to tell us." With shaking hands, Claire opened the box and began to read. I watched her face as she went through letter after letter. I saw the moment she realized what they contained. Her eyes widened, her breathing became shallow. She read the letter about Margaret's concerns when Claire and Leonard first married. then the one about Leonard wanting to move in, and finally, the one where Margaret had tried to warn Claire herself just days before she died. When Claire finished the last letter, she looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. She knew. Mom knew everything. Yes, I said. She tried to warn both of us. I didn't listen. But you, Claire, you rejected her. You chose Leonard over your dying mother's concerns. Claire's face crumpled completely. I remember that conversation. She was so weak, and she was trying to tell me something about Leonard. I thought she was confused from the medication. I thought she was being unfair to him. So I told her to stop. I told her she was wrong. Her voice broke. That was one of the last real conversations I had with her, and I spent it defending Leonard. I spent it refusing to listen to her. She died trying to protect us, I said quietly. She died knowing that we were both walking into a trap, and she couldn't stop it. Claire covered her face with her hands, her entire body shaking with sobs. I failed her. I failed both of you. Mom saw what Leonard was, and instead of listening to her, I pushed her away. And then I let him treat you exactly the way she predicted he would. I wanted to comfort her. Part of me, the part that was still her father, wanted to hold her and tell her it would be okay, but I couldn't. The hurt was too deep, too raw. Why are you showing me this now? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To punish me? No, I said, to show you the truth. To show you that your mother loved us both enough to try to save us, even when she knew she was dying. And to show you that you have a choice to make. What choice? The choice of who you want to be, I said. Do you want to be the woman Leonard turned you into? Weak, afraid, willing to betray your own family for security? Or do you want to be the woman your mother raised, the one who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard? Claire looked at the letters spread across the table, then back at me. I don't know if I can be that person anymore, Dad. I don't know if that person still exists. Then you need to find her, I said. Not for me, not even for your mother's memory, for yourself, because if you don't, Leonard wins. He took 3 years of our lives, destroyed our family, and turned you into someone you're not. Don't let that be permanent. Claire stood up slowly, gathering the letters with trembling hands. Can I keep these? I want to read them again. I need to read them again. I nodded. They're as much yours as mine. Your mother wrote them for both of us. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything. But I want you to know, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to become the person Mom wanted me to be. Good, I said. That's a start. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, feeling the weight of Margaret's letters, of her wisdom, of her love that extended beyond death. She had tried to save us, and maybe, just maybe, she still had. 6 months passed before I saw Claire again. In that time, I learned to live with the silence. I learned to cook for one, to eat dinner at the table Margaret and I had shared for so many years, to sleep in our bed without feeling crushed by loneliness. I started small projects around the house. I repainted the guest room, the one Claire and Leonard had occupied. I chose a soft blue, Margaret's favorite color. I replaced the curtains in the living room, fixed the loose board on the front porch, planted new flowers in the garden. Each project was a small act of reclaiming my space, my life, my home. I also started attending a grief support group at the community center. It was something I should have done 3 years ago, after Margaret died, but Claire and Leonard's presence had made it impossible. I couldn't grieve properly when I was too busy surviving their presence. The group met every Thursday evening. There were 8 of us, all dealing with the loss of spouses, some more recently than others. We shared our stories, our pain, our small victories. It was there that I met Howard, a 72-year-old man who had lost his wife of 50 years. We started having coffee after the meetings, and eventually those coffee meetings turned into a genuine friendship. Howard never asked about my family situation. He seemed to understand that some wounds were too fresh to discuss. Instead, we talked about other things. Books we were reading, news, sports, the small pleasures of life that continued despite loss. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected. One Thursday evening, as I was leaving the community center, I saw Claire sitting in her car in the parking lot. She looked different, thinner, but not unhealthy. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished. I walked over to her car. She rolled down the window. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Claire," I acknowledged. "What are you doing here?" I've been coming to the grief group too, the one that meets on Tuesdays, for people dealing with divorce and family estrangement." She looked down at her hands. "I saw your car and thought I'd wait, see if you'd talk to me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to walk away. to maintain the distance I'd carefully constructed. But another part of me, the part that still remembered her as my little girl, couldn't do it. "Have you eaten?" I asked. She shook her head. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here. We can talk there." We sat across from each other in a booth at the back of the diner. The waitress brought us coffee, and we ordered simple meals. Neither of us seemed to have much appetite. "How are you?" I asked, breaking the silence. Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I'm okay. I got a job at a bookstore downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's enough. I have a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. And Leonard? I filed for divorce 3 months ago. It'll be final next month." She took a sip of coffee. He tried to fight it at first, tried to claim he deserved alimony because he'd given up career opportunities to live with you. "Can you believe that?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "What happened?" "My lawyer shut it down pretty quickly. Leonard had no case, and he knew it. Eventually, he gave up and signed the papers." She paused. "I heard he moved to another state. California, I think. I don't really care where he is as long as he's far away from me." The waitress brought our food. We ate in silence for a few minutes. "I've been reading Mom's letters," Claire said finally. "Every night before bed. I read them and I try to understand how I could have been so blind, so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I said. "You were manipulated. That's what my therapist says too." She gave a small, sad smile. "I started seeing someone, therapy, working through everything that happened, trying to figure out why I let Leonard control me the way I did." "Have you figured it out?" Claire thought for a moment. "Some of it. I think after Mom died, I was so terrified of being alone that I clung to Leonard. He was my security, my anchor, and he knew that. He knew exactly how to keep me dependent on him." She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "But that doesn't excuse what I did to you, Dad. I let him hurt you. I participated in hurting you, and I'm so sorry." I set down my fork, studying my daughter's face. She looked sincere, but sincerity wasn't enough to erase 3 years of pain. "I believe you're sorry," I said carefully. "But Claire, I need you to understand something. What happened, what you and Leonard did, it changed me. It changed how I see you. I can't just forget that." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she nodded. "I know. I don't expect you to forget. I don't expect you to forgive me either. I just want you to know that I'm trying to be better, to be the person Mom wanted me to be." "How's that going?" I asked. She laughed, but it was hollow. "It's hard. Some days I wake up and I feel strong, like I can handle anything. Other days I wake up and I can't believe how much I lost, how much I threw away." "What did you lose, Claire?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. She was quiet for a long moment. "I lost you. I lost the house I grew up in, the place where I felt safest. I lost my marriage, but honestly, I don't think I ever really had that. Mostly I lost myself. The person I was before Leonard, she's gone. I'm trying to find her again, but I don't know if I can." I felt a pang of sadness for her. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, and seeing her lost and broken was painful. "You can find yourself again," I said. "It won't be the same person you were before. Too much has happened. But you can become someone new, someone stronger." "Like you did?" she asked. I thought about that. "I'm not stronger, Claire. I'm different. I learned to set boundaries. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you." She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. We finished our meal in relative silence. When the check came, I paid, and we walked out to the parking lot together. "Dad," Claire said as we reached her car, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you think someday we might be able to have a relationship again? Not like before. I know we can't go back. But something. Maybe something new." I looked at my daughter, at this woman who had hurt me so deeply, but who was clearly trying to change. I thought about Margaret's letters, about her hope that we would both find our way back to ourselves. "I don't know, Claire," I said honestly. "Right now, the distance feels necessary. It feels safe. But maybe, in time, we can figure something out, something different. Can I call you sometimes? Nothing heavy, just to check in?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Once a month. You can call once a month. But if it becomes too much, if it starts to hurt again, I'll have to step back." "I understand," she said quickly. "Once a month it's more than I deserve." She got in her car, and I watched her drive away. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, but something close to it. A possibility that maybe, eventually, we could find some kind of peace. 3 months later, Claire started coming to Sunday dinners. Not every Sunday, just once a month, as we'd agreed. She'd arrive at 5, help me cook, and we'd eat together. We didn't talk about Leonard. We didn't talk about those 3 years. We talked about her job, about books she was reading, about the small details of our separate lives. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before. That was gone, buried with Margaret and destroyed by Leonard's manipulation. This was something new, something careful and fragile. Sometimes, when I looked at Claire across the dinner table, I could see glimpses of the daughter I'd raised. The way she laughed at a joke, the way she concentrated when she was cooking, the way she looked at the pictures of Margaret on the mantel with such deep regret. But I also saw someone new, someone who was learning to stand on her own, to make her own decisions, to take responsibility for her mistakes. One Sunday, nearly a year after the eviction, Claire and I were washing dishes together when she said, "I drove by the house yesterday, the old neighborhood. It looks the same." "It does," I agreed. "Do you ever think about selling it? Moving somewhere smaller, easier to maintain?" I dried a plate slowly, thinking about her question. A year ago, that question would have felt like an attack, like another attempt to take my home. But now it just felt like genuine curiosity. "I think about it sometimes," I admitted. "But not yet. This house, it's still full of your mother. I'm not ready to leave her behind." Claire nodded, her eyes misty. "I understand. Can I tell you something?" "Sure." Sometimes I dream about those Sunday dinners we used to have, when I was little and Mom was alive and we were a family. In the dreams, everything is perfect. And then I wake up and remember that I helped destroy that. That because of my choices, we can never have that again. I set down the dish towel and looked at my daughter. "No, we can't have that again. But Claire, we're having Sunday dinners now. They're not the same, but they're something. And maybe, if we keep trying, if we keep being honest with each other, they'll become something good." She smiled, a small, fragile smile. "I'd like that." After she left that evening, I sat in my living room, looking at the pictures of Margaret. I thought about her letters, about her warnings, about her love that had tried to protect us even from beyond death. "I think we're going to be okay, Maggie," I whispered to her picture. "It won't be the same, but we're finding our way." The house was quiet around me, but it wasn't the crushing silence it had been. It was peaceful. It was mine. I had learned that love without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the hurt to continue. I had learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say no, even to the people you love most. Claire and I would never have the relationship we once had. That family died the day Leonard threw my plate on the floor, maybe even earlier than that. But we were building something new, something more honest, something that acknowledged the pain while trying to move forward. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I'd hoped for when Claire was born, when I'd imagined our future together. But it was real, and it was based on truth, and that made it worth the effort. On Thursday evenings, I still went to my grief group. On Sundays, once a month, Claire came for dinner. The rest of the time, I lived my life. I spent time with Howard and the other friends I'd made. I worked on my house, read books, took walks in the neighborhood Margaret and I had called home for over 40 years. I was 61 years old, and I was learning to live again. Not the life I'd planned, not the life I'd lost, but a new life, one where I was no longer invisible, no longer a doormat, no longer willing to sacrifice my dignity for the illusion of family harmony. Margaret had tried to save me with her letters, with her warnings, but in the end, I had to save myself, and I did.